to see the threads. Also, I look like a Muppet because all you see is the little head. I am really thrilled to be here. Wow, what a turnout. You women are really gorgeous. I've been spotting your dress. I like that. Beautiful. Anyway, this is an amazing group. And what a theme. The power of story. You know, listening to another person's story is really kind of like a gift. As much as we love to tell our own story, listening to another person's story is very much like a gift to that person. It values them. And so I thank you so much for inviting me to share a bit of my life today. People are very often surprised that I don't live in LA. I did about 15 years ago, but now my home is in Berkeley, California. And the reason that three Bay people, you're wearing your space shoes. I went up there to, my husband and I went up there to visit our daughter, Fernanda Luisa. And she said, we're going to do something really Northern California for you this weekend. We're going to take you to Napa Valley for wine tasting. And it was wonderful. It was really marvelous. But two things were at war with each other. The idea, you know, when you taste wine, you slosh it around in your mouth, and there's a bucket to spit it out. And when I saw that bucket, I went, ew, that is disgusting. So I swallowed for the rest of the day. I had not had breakfast. I got bombed. My husband, the nice Jewish doctor, that's redundant. Anyway, he got bombed, and he rarely drank. I mean, we were really 3 sheets to the wind. And I mean, when it got to the point where I was saying things like, after tasting white wine, I'd say, you know, that's a very naughty Chardonnay. And my daughter said, I think we better take them home to her husband. So she poured us into the car. I'm just explaining how I ended up there. She poured us into the car, and as she's driving back to her house, she hears me saying to my husband, you know, this is a very nice life. Well, let's move up here. And my husband, the nice Jewish doctor, the inflexible Jewish doctor, says, okay. Drunk as a skunk. And we really fell in love with the northern part of California, and we charged our daughter Fernanda to find us a house, which she loves doing. She still does that. Whenever there's a sign, you can be sure she's in there to look at the place. She found us a house, and we've been there ever since, and it's been wonderful for us. So, other moves in my life were nowhere near as easy as that. When I was 5, my mommy brought me here in New York City, or the United States, from Puerto Rico to find a better life. And I can tell you that it was a shock to go from that beautiful, verdant Caribbean island with the fragrances and the palm trees and the bougainvillea, and end up in the middle of February in New York City, in the middle of February. You have no idea. The shock is enormous, and I remember thinking, what was my mother thinking? But that came right after a horrific trip on a boat, because we couldn't afford airplanes in those days. That was for rich people. So we took, we were steerage on a boat, unhappily named the SS Carabobo. Carabobo. You heard my stupid face. Not a good omen for this wonderful new better life, right? Anyway, it was a very, very difficult beginning for me. I mean, my mom too, but she'd been there already. She cased the joint, as it were, and then came to get me, and like 6 months later. to come to New York City. So I quickly learned some words that never expected to learn, like spick, and wop, and garlic mouth, and pierced ear. And I was only 6 years old. I didn't know what those words meant, but the way in which they were uttered said to me that something was wrong with me. Something was not good about me, and I couldn't figure out what that was. And I never told my mommy because I figured there wasn't anything she could do about it. And I learned very quickly the art of zigzagging on the way home for lunch, because in those days I used to go home for lunch. And I would zigzag up and down the streets up till I got to my apartment building, because there were gangs all over the place. And they were, those are the fellows, you know, the young men who used to say those terrible things to me. So I got my exercise. I zigzagged my ass off. And what I got to doing was I decided to just hide out in the apartment whenever I could until I made some friends who spoke my language. And of course, almost nobody did them because we came to New York City before the diaspora. We were really the very, very early immigrants. And so I'd stay home and play with my favorite friends, my paper dolls. And on warm nights in the summer, I would open the window to the fire escape, and my mommy would put out a blanket on the fire escape, and I would lay down and look up at the stars at night and listen to this table radio we had that I used to call the cathedral because it had that shape. Anybody remember those little table radios? See, only the people with gray hair say. And I'd look up at the stars, and I'd sing with the radio. And there was a song I loved because it absolutely said everything that I felt. And it was a dream when you're feeling blue. Dream, that's the thing to do. Dreams never are as sad as they seem. So dream, dream, dream. And I would look up at the stars and I'd say, it's still one of my favorite songs because I believe in dreaming. And I would look up at the stars and I'd say, someday something wonderful is going to happen to me. I want to be wonderful. I want to be somebody. I want to do something great. So I'm cutting all this short because it's an 82-year-old life. So now we're going to when I was 16. That's when I was 10. When I was 16, a talent scout saw me at a dance recital. My dancing school had a recital. And that led to a meeting with Louis B. Mayer of Metro-Goldwyn Mayer. MGM was the studio, the dream studio of every young person who could sing, dance, and act, because that's where they had the great musicals. That's the studio that had people like Gene Kelly and Ann Miller and Judy Garland. It was just, so when I was signed to that studio, I thought I died and gone to heaven. And I was promptly shipped off to Culver City, the studio in California, LA, where MGM was. My uneducated mommy was my only mentor. I mean, there were no mentors for young Latino women. Forget about it. There was no such thing. No role models either. In fact, I ended up choosing Elizabeth Taylor because she just seemed the closest to what I wanted to be. But my mommy, though she didn't know a lot, she was uneducated. She knew how to be, she was a good person, and she worked hard, and she never quit. All qualities that she taught me in my youth. I adored her. But oh my God, the language problem. I would get so embarrassed. Oh my God, you know, English is a very difficult language, right? And Mommy had problems with J and Y. She would, juxtapose them. Yes, I am wearing my pajamas. Do you know what I mean? Yes, okay. Especially Puerto Ricans. Anyway, every Saturday was, every second Saturday was cleanup day in our apartment, little ghetto apartment. And she would say to me, Rosita, today is our day. Do you know what that means? It's time to change the shits. Yeah, it's funny now. And then one very hot, muggy day, as can only happen in New York City, my little girlfriend Angela, came for a play date. Of course, at my house it wasn't Angela, it was Aniela. And it was really hot. And my mom starts pacing up and down the apartment saying, ay, bendito sea Dios que me muero de calor. She says, you know what, girls? It's too hot to do any work today, for piss sake. So I'll tell you what we are going to do. We're going to pack a picnic lunch and have a nice swing at the beach. Mortifying doesn't quite cover it. Because Aniela is very busy doing. I take my mommy aside and I say to her, Mommy, bendito sea Dios, Mommy, que ruego. Can't you say sheets? Can't you at least say sheets? She said, no, I can't. Why, Mommy? Because I got trouble with my bowels. It sounds like stand-up, doesn't it? My life. But I met the man of my dreams whom I was going to marry, this nice Jewish doctor, Leonard Goldman. Leonard. Can you imagine how thrilled both families were? Oh, they were singing and dancing in the streets. Ay, 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 me muero, me suicido. Ay, qué mal. Both sides of town are already grieving. And so I said to my mommy, listen, Mommy, I think that you should meet Lenny because I think he'll change your mind. He's really a wonderful fellow. And the only way to get over all of this business is for you to meet him. And I know you're going to like him. So she said, that is a good idea. We'll make some piss with both the families. So then he comes to my house, apartment, and he gets to the door. My mom opens the door. She takes one look at him and she says, Jew are a you. Husband to me was so nervous, he actually said, yes, I am. My relationship with my husband in a nutshell. So anyway, working in Hollywood, back when it was an all-white, all-male dominated industry, was unbelievably challenging. And sometimes a little scary too. I was considered essentially studio property as a contract player. They believed that they owned you, and you believed it too. You played the part you were given and you didn't question if you wanted to work. My roles were to play every ethnic stereotype you can imagine. Indian princess, Indian from India, Cajun girl, Polynesian runaway, even an Arabian girl. This was especially demeaning to me, a young Latina who was already wrestling with issues of self-worth, the color of her skin. As we all know, that's such a big struggle. And the excessive curls in her hair. The studio became your life and could even cast you as the date of some Hollywood bigwig, which is one of the things that happened to me. Now, when I tell you this story, it's going to have one very, very bad word in it. And I want you to know in advance that I'm quoting. And it's important that I use it because I'm quoting the person who used it at me. So please keep that in mind. But if I don't say it, it's not going to be the same story. Here we go. So right after Darryl F. Zanuck of 20th Century Fox signed me to a contract to be one of the foxes in the Fox stable, I was sent off to an afternoon cocktail party by the publicity department on the arm of a man named Harry Carl, the famous shoe tycoon who was then on his second divorce from Debbie Reynolds. And he was a lover of all things young and beautiful, which he most definitely was not. Well, within minutes of meeting Mr. Carl inside the vast confines of his bright yellow Cadillac convertible, it is clear that he and I don't even have the weather in common. And by the time we enter the home of Alfred Hart, the famous whiskey tycoon, and the butler took my wrap, I suddenly realized that I'd been abandoned by my gay Mr. Harry Carl. I don't know where he went. I never did see him for the rest of the evening. There I was, left to swim in a sea of powerfully rich men who were looking for any poor woman willing to show some gratitude. Columbia Pictures comes over. Oh yeah, the head of Columbia Pictures comes over. His name is, I can say it now because he's very dead. Thank you. The head of Columbia Pictures, a man named Harry Cohen, very feared man all over Hollywood, comes over to where I'm sitting and actually says the following. Gives me a once-over and he says, I want to fuck you. First of all, that may have been the second time in my life that I heard that word. I was 18. What did I do? Not much. I was so shocked that I stood up and I had this silly, stupid little grin on my face. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what to say. I had no idea. I mean, I didn't even know what my name was at that moment. And at that point, I decided I'm getting away from this crowd. All these big, powerful Hollywood people were there with their wives, by the way. This guy said that with his wife not 10 feet away from him. So I decided to just stand against the wall and sort of try to become invisible. And the man comes over and starts to manhandle me. And I'm getting really, really upset, and I'm pushing him away, and the host of the party, Mr. Alfred Hart, comes over to save me. And he said, come on, kid, let's go dance. His house actually had a dance floor and a band. You can imagine that. He takes me to the dance floor, and I'll never forget, they were playing a bolero. And he starts holding me very tight. And it gets tighter and tighter. He's drawing me very close to him, and he's starting to breathe heavily. And I could see some perspiration popping on his upper lip. And I'm trying to push away, but he's moving against me. We all know what I mean by that. And he says the following words to me, because he had just met me. You're a hot little bitch, aren't you? I'll bet you're wild in bed. And he's breathing heavily, and I say, please, Mr. Hart, please. And his wife is right there. And I finally push really, really hard and run to the powder room. And I lock the door and I start crying, and my mascara's running. And I'm saying to myself, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? What am I going to do? And by the way, I was wearing this beautiful little gown, little cocktail gown from the studio that I borrowed from the studio. And I looked really sweet. I see pictures of myself in that outfit. And the mascara's out. Finally someone knocks on the door of the bathroom. So I quickly wipe the mascara streaks And I come out of the bathroom looking down, and I think, I have to get out of here. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I have to get out of here. I didn't even think about my so-called date. And little by little, I just sidled along the foyer and snuck out the door. I didn't pick up my wrap because that would have meant that someone might have seen me. I couldn't call anybody because someone might have seen me. I had a little evening purse that had $3 in it, a compact and a lipstick. And I went out the door and slowly closed it. And it was really cold out that night. And I thought, well, okay, I'll just take off my shoes and walk back to my little cottage in Culver City, which was 15 miles away. But I thought, hey, it's better than nothing. And I took off my shoes, and then I spotted the Mexican gardeners who had been there and were just finishing their work in the early evening. And I went to them and I spoke in Spanish with tears in my eyes, and I just said, please, can you take me home? And it's interesting. They saw me, and I saw them, and I didn't have to say anything. They knew. They knew. One of them took off his very dirty soiled jacket, put it around my shoulders, and sat me in the front seat, passenger seat of the pickup truck, and took me home. I didn't go to another party for years. Quite a story, huh? Yeah. Finding myself was not made any easier when, given all these ethnic roles. I was always say things like, John Kibik, why do you not love Rita no more? You think you can fool Conchita? So it was not made easier when I had to do those kind of roles. I was trying to find myself, and I learned it's very hard to do that alone. I would need to build healthy relationships with people who loved me, with no strings attached. And that would not come until many, many years later, when I met my husband Lenny and had my daughter Fernanda Luisa. After the Oscar for West Side Story and the Golden Globe, by the way, I did not make another movie for 7 years. 7 years. I was offered a couple of things, but they were all bad gang movies. And with my little gold man under my arm and my Golden Globe under the other arm, I thought, that day is over. I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to speak with an accent anymore unless it makes perfect sense. And I showed them I didn't make a movie for 7 years. I turned down those roles. I was always grateful for the work that I did get, which was mostly television, but I wasn't too proud of it. As proof, I don't remember most of it. Because, once you've seen the view from the mountaintop, you have no desire to spend your time wandering through the valley of bad movies. By the end of those 7 years, I was desperate, and I was hungry to work on something.